Yes, yes. The horn of King Henry shall sound in the deep one last time. Let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Fell deeds awake. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the touchdown. Forth, Yerlingus! And go forth he did as the spark plugs rode King Henry to yet another week as the top scorer, and they are now the only remaining unbeaten squad in the league. Welcome back once again to the dungeon of the Doctors of Doom, where I am your wounded but resilient host, Alex the Shark Sparks, and joining me as always is the man who wishes a tie was the worst thing that had happened to him this weekend, Mitch, not worth it, Coach Black, and the man who put an end to my winning streak. So as much as I hate to do it, he deserves some props. So give it up for Vinny Cheesehead Santucci. Say hello to everyone out there in listener land, fellas.
What's up, fantasy football world? Hey, I just wanted to say that I love that you used Nolan in your intro this week. I'm also in the intro, so I guess you get to hedge your bets. One of us will lose unless we pull a Mitch and Matt.
I mean, I gotta say, I have to go out and apologies to Mitch, the Buccaneers organization, Baker Mayfield, and most of the Chris Godwin. I talked about the curse. The 1 week nothing happened was the week where I didn't name a player, I named a team, and a lot of people on my team got hurt that week, but I still won. But I named Chris Godwin last week. I thought everything was fine, and then literally less than a minute left in garbage time, Chris Godwin makes the grab, which ironically gets Mitch the tie with Matt. But Godwin goes down bad, so bad they won't even show the replay on TV. They're like, nope, we can't re-show that. He gets carted off, so fairly certain he's done. So that's why I said, Mitch, not worth it. So we'll start there, Mitch. What are your thoughts on, I mean, obviously it's not worth it to you lose Godwin, but what are your thoughts on the coach's decision to keep going for it during the game when the game's effectively wrapped up and then have a player get injured like that?
They obviously are. He's got reasons that I don't see. I mean, maybe you want to keep Baker in rhythm. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But the injury is unfortunate. I was hoping to have a top receiver for the rest of the year, but it's going to be tough without him. The only other thing is Godwin had a touchdown in the second quarter called back on an offensive holding, and that would have won me the game right then and there in the second quarter. So I'm not really too upset about it. It's whatever. I'll work through it. I lost Metcalf and Godwin the same week. We'll push through it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, no shade to Matt, but I was definitely rooting for you just because Matt's in my division. And like when that play happened, I celebrated, and then when I realized that Godwin wasn't getting up, I immediately sank back into my chair. I felt so bad for like the player and the team because I mean that the Bucks team, like they looked so good this year, and now they've lost their number one and number two wide receivers, and I just think that's going to be a huge blow to the organization.
Well,
So
the interesting part comes into what happens with the replacement is so it seems like Trey Palmer is coming in just purely for Evans's role. So when Evans comes out, Palmer comes in, and then it's going to be coming down to Sterling Shepard, Jalen, I forget his name, and Kate Auden. Is Kate Auden, are all three of them get less fantasy value? It's not like, so the question becomes, because Godwin is gone, does someone else get that volume because Baker's having such a good year? Or does no one is going to fill that volume and Baker's just going to have worse stats now that Godwin's gone? You know what I'm trying to say? Is there like any receiver who could come in and even remotely fill the shoes of what Godwin had there?
yeah, I was actually going to
Hey,
talk
I
about
don't.
where we. Oh, go ahead, Vinny.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, to answer that question, I really don't think so. I don't think you replace Mike Evans, and I don't think you replace Chris Godwin. I think Baker will be mildly successful, but he's not going to have these 300-yard, 3 to 4 passing touchdown games. I think he's going to be floating around the 250 mark pretty regularly. You don't lose that caliber of talent. Baker's not wide receiver proof, you know. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and to your point, Mitch, you're talking about Jalen McMillan's who you're thinking about, and
I think no, thinking.
I do think there's gonna be a struggle because like everyone's like he was a hot waiver wire pickup in a lot of leagues, and most of my leagues, especially Fab leagues, a lot of Fab was blown on him, and the reason for this was he had 8 targets this week, so that was just on Evans being out for most of the game. He had 8 targets. What's he gonna have with both Evans and Godwin out? The problem is on those 8 targets, he only caught 3 of them for 15 yards. That's not a good look, right? If you have a sub 50% catch rate and then 8 targets, only 15 yards receiving, that's not what you're looking for. It's like, yes, there's a chance this could be there, but I think it's going to be much more of a committee style. And worth noting here in DoD, he's still a free agent, whereas in most leagues he was picked up. And I think compared to most of my leagues, I do think DoD, for the most part, is more on the ball as far as like player value. Not everyone in the league, obviously, but I think there's quite a few, especially those that listen to our podcast, are more in tune with what's happening in the NFL. So the fact that he's still a free agent in this league versus a lot of other leagues he got picked up, I think is telling.
Yeah, I will say this too. It's kind of going back to the injury itself. I mean, you could argue the greatest coaches of like the last decade would be like Shanahan, McVay, Reed, and Harbaugh, Tomlin, right? And then everybody else maybe kind of sprinkled in. When Jim Harbaugh started rolling out the backup quarterback and backup running backs, Henry and Lamar were on the bench after the Bucks like last touchdown, and then the Bucks decide to roll out their starting offense again after like the Ravens didn't even try to ice the game. So I'm like, I get that you never want to give up on a game, but man, that is just a brutal injury, especially after like Harbaugh didn't even like, he's like literally after they got another onside kick was like, there's no way you're going to get a second onside kick. You're not going to score twice. We're not even going to try to run out the clock, and then you lose Godwin for the year. So I just think it's crazy. It was just a crazy coaching decision.
Yeah, I mean, like I get it. Like I get the will to win, but I'm with you. And like I'm never about taking the knee, right? Like you never just want to take a knee and give up. I'm a PT dub kind of guy. I have to be honest. If I was in the coach's decision, because I'm always playing to win, I would probably have rolled my offense out there. However, that's like the emotional part of me, the like logical part of me, absolutely wouldn't have, because like you said, they're in a good position to win this division. In fact, their matchup this week is their second game. Upcoming week it'll be their second game against the Falcons, which is going to kind of be for the division realistically, because the Saints are out of it now with the injuries they've had. They had so many injuries in the game, not just on offense and defense. The Bucs had multiple injuries, so to risk that, because like you said, even in a magical world where they get the onside kick, score again to tie it, then Lamar's still on the other side, who's thrown 5 touchdowns instead. You're not stopping him. You only stopped him because they took him out of the game. Like that was a bad call. And back to the real quick before you chime in, Mitch, I know you want to talk, but another reason. Waivers, I did pick up Cade Otton. I didn't pick up Jalen, and the reason I picked up Cade Otton, 10 targets, caught 8 of them for 100 yards, right? So like that's a very good catch rate. Also, this is a guy who's been getting decent targets for a few games now, so I think the value is here regardless on a guy like Otton. So I think if you're in a league where Otton is available, that's definitely someone to pick up for the next couple of weeks. Whereas I think it's a lot more of a stretch with the Trey Palmers and the Jalen McMillans and all those guys of the world. Sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
No, it's just I know I gave a kind of a generic answer because I'm just more focusing on Godwin, but I'll give a more serious answer. It's so like in the end of the Ravens game, Derrick Henry got like 90 of his, in the second half, and when it was technically out of touch, right? On the flip side, like didn't Derrick Henry, they still rolled Henry. I know you want to keep running the ball, but here's my other question is like, if he doesn't get hurt, are we even talking about it? Versus if they started kneeing too early, we'd be like, why are you kneeing so early in a prevention of a potential injury? I'm trying to say, it's like, I don't think that's a winning situation for Bowles, to where it's like, if he calls it in too early, then everyone would be like, why are you kneeing already? You should be trying. And on the flip side, Derrick Henry was getting most of his yards after it was kind of out of reach. I have a question for going back to the tight end situation. How many of these top tight ends benefit from losing their wide receiver? So does George Kittle benefit from losing his wide receiver? Does he get an uptake?
I think
so.
I think Kittle is like one of those that definitely does.
I just think the target volume goes up. Another good one that we can look at is David Njoku. Hold on,
That's another one. I was going to do Bowers. His targets don't seem to be affected without Adams.
Anyway, before we're getting a little side, before we just one more comment about the Bucs. I think what you made was a great point, Mitch. Like the fact that I think you're right. Had he not rolled his first string offense out there, we might be sitting here criticizing not going for it. You're only down 2 scores and you got the onside kick. Why aren't you going for it? So, I mean, I do see both sides of the argument. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20. It's hard to say what was the right call.
Maybe he had Godwin in his fantasy league. We don't know.
Maybe he did. Maybe he's in that same situation. I mean, look. If there's someone you really want to beat, Mitch, I know it's Matt, right? Like, if there's one guy you really want to beat in this league, and me too. He's kind of look, when he's one of the guys with the most chips, and he's your older brother, and he's in my division. Like, there's a lot of rivalries there, so like, I get it. But anyway, to the tight end thing, yeah, I think Kittle's volume goes up with the injuries.
Bowers
he's
does
already
not
getting
change with.
He's already getting
with
good volume though,
yeah,
so like it's hard
true.
to say like.
Very true.
Well, Bowers is you can't really Bowers is going to be playing with 3 quarterbacks over the past 3 weeks, right? So like it's really hard to say like.
Sample. You're right. That's a good
You know
point.
what I mean? But look at the targets: 12, 10, 14, right? These are the games where Adams wasn't playing, either because he was injured, and I'm using air quotes on that, or because he was traded, right? He didn't play against Denver, 12 targets. He didn't play against Pittsburgh, 10 targets. He didn't play against LA because he wasn't on the team anymore, 14 targets. So his targets did go way up in the lack of that. And then I got to find Njoku. I don't think he's a very high on the list here, but
no, he's up a little bit higher.
Is he?
Yeah, tight ends don't score any points. You just need 1 week.
Yeah, that's true. I think you're Njoku again. Look, first game without Amari Cooper, 14 targets. Right.
So I'm agreeing with you. That's why I'm trying to make this point. Is what about like Kyle Pitts? Like, does he benefit from a wide receiver going? I'm not saying one went down, but what if like does he benefit, or is he right at the perfect spot right now?
I think.
I think he would.
Go ahead, Vinny.
I think he would benefit as well. I just think he would benefit. I think a lot of tight, like you're always going to default to your next best like weapon. You're going to get creative in getting them the ball, and I think Pitts would benefit from that.
I think tight ends are often considered a quarterback's safety blanket. If you look at Aaron Rodgers, the years when he didn't have a receiver, like a top wide receiver in Green Bay, either because of injury or because they left the team, he relied heavily on his tight ends and his running backs because those were his safety nets. So I think the same thing. I think in this situation, Kirk Cousins might like if he were to lose both Drake London and Darnell Mooney, he might rely more on Pitts. Pitts was already the highest target share last week, so he's already getting more comfortable with Pitts. So I definitely feel like that could definitely be a thing. But anyway, that's why I picked up Cade Otton. I have Pitts. I already like Pitts. I'm starting Pitts over Otton this week, most likely. However, I wanted to pick up Cade Otton because, like, look,
upside
10 targets, and that was with Godwin playing the entire game because Godwin came out for the last play, right? Like, he played the whole game. What does this target number look like next week with no Otton and no Mike Evans for the entire contest? So we'll see.
The only thing I'm nervous about is once you go back to practice and you be able to script plays again, maybe it was him relying on Otton right then and there because all of a sudden he's looking around, there's no Evans and no Godwin. He's like, this is the only guy I recognize. I'm going to throw him the ball. So I was actually thinking about Otton too, but the whole point of this conversation is I'm going to walk you guys right into this. So if Jameson Williams is suspended for 2 weeks, does Sam Laporta finally have good weeks?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, I think like a guy like Laporta would benefit big time from like an Amon-Ra going down. Jameson has not been stealing a lot of targets the last few weeks, so I don't know if I can
is
say
Laporta just benched now? Is he just where are my 125 targets?
Yeah,
like where is
is
he just benchable?
I don't know if it's been like I don't know who your backup is, but I think the issue with Laporta and this team is just they're so good in so many places they don't have to rely on him right now. Last season, it really felt like they were relying on Laporta for a lot because they had
worse than brutal.
Because they had
it's
Gibbs and Montgomery are both great, right? Gibbs and Montgomery are both great, but they were injured at different times last year. They never had them both on the field for most of the season. This year, they've had them both on the field every game, right? So
sure,
like I was talking about your safety blanket. Well, the guys who are catching those short routes near the line of scrimmage, peeling off out of the backfield, those are your tight ends and your running backs. And when you've got 2 stud running backs who are both healthy, the fact that you have a good tight end isn't as valuable as when it was when you only had the one running back and you had to keep him safe because the other one was hurt and he was previously hurt.
Very good point. I like that. So Laporta's been just scripted out this year in the offseason because all right, then here's a better question. We've got 1 year 1 and 1 year 2, very drastic years between Laporta and his rookie year. What's going to be the future? Is it closer to what we're seeing now, or is it just random every year, or is he going to go back to the top 10? Like if you look at the stats from last year, fantasy wise in our league, and look at it's like Laporta's not even close. It's like he's so by far and away better than everyone else. This is last year's stats. If you go into like scores, does it show last year's? Stats. Yeah. He's not on pace for any of that.
He's not. I think the talent's there, right? We saw it as a rookie that he has the talent. Now, a lot of times, defensive backs can catch up to wide receivers in their second year. They have a good first year, bad second year, good third. That's kind of a weird thing with wide receivers. Not always, but So, I mean, that's definitely a possibility that it could be partially that. Teams, had a better look at him and he's got to adapt to that. But I think it's more so he's a talented player, but there's just, look, for whatever reason, the Lions traded for Jared Goff and Jared Goff became good, right? I think they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now. Their quarterback is playing fantastic football. He's got lots of targets that he can spread the ball out to. So that limits Laporta's value. But in a world where, one of those running backs, leaves because of injury or because of a trade or because of the contract deal or whatever, there's one less running back on the team, then that opens up a lot more of the game flow to go through Laporta. I think there's just too many good things around him. It's kind of like this year with Ayuk. Everyone's like, what's happened to Ayuk this year? Yeah, Ayuk played poorly, but it's also like Jawan Jennings stepped up. Greg Kittle has stepped up. Deebo Samuel's stepped up. Jordan Mason stepped up. They've had so many good weapons in San Francisco. They didn't need to rely on Ayuk as much as they did last year when it was kind of just like the Ayuk and CMC show the whole season because Kittle was hurt and Deebo was hurt. Right?
You want to hear a wild stat? Want to hear a wild stat?
Yeah, go
so the Lions in the last 4 weeks have more touchdowns, 18, than Jared Goff incompletions. And Laporta has 4 points in each of those games. He's like ignored on the highest scoring offense. This offense that's setting all this points per game, yards per game records, and he's just being completely ignored.
Yeah, I didn't mean to audibly say brutal, but I didn't realize how bad his season actually was. Only fitting that he has that 50-yard flea flicker touchdown against me.
If he doesn't have that touchdown
week
against you, I'm in more trouble fantasy than I am now.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on tight ends, but just like
Sure.
a thought that crossed my mind. So we talked about like number one wide receivers going down and how that boosts the value of tight ends, right?
Yeah.
Does that like solidify the fact that Kincaid is not elite? That Kincaid is a very average tight end in a system? Because he didn't have a number one receiver all year until they just got Amari Cooper, and he has not been that good.
I also thought Dawson Knox was
he,
better most of the
Yeah,
time.
I know Kincaid is like a darling. I think he's on Matt's team, unless he's dropped him yet.
Yeah, so I think the issue with Kincaid was I think Dawson I think he's just Dawson Knox, right? Like he's the same player and they're on the same team. I think is what it is. Like last year when Knox went down, Kincaid was the guy because Knox was down, but Knox isn't down anymore. They picked up some wide receivers, some rookies, whoever. Like Stephon Diggs leaving. I guess the question was, would Diggs leaving increase Kincaid's targets? And it seems like the answer is no.
Yeah.
But I think that has more so to do that they don't play the same role. So like the reason I think Cade Otton is going to benefit from Chris Godwin going down more so than Mike Evans is because that Chris Godwin is a slot receiver, right? They often run routes over the middle, whereas Evans is an outside guy running fly routes. Cade Otton's not going to be running fly routes on the outside, right? So he's not going to pick up those targets where Mike Evans left off, whereas he is a guy who's going to go across the middle of the field and he's going to pick up those targets from Godwin, right? So maybe Stephon Diggs, the role that he played isn't the same role that Kincaid played on the team. You know what I mean? I know that Diggs also played the slot. I'm just saying, like, maybe they don't run the same routes. That's one of the things with Travis Kelce. Everyone thought Kelce's volume was way down to start the year because Rashee Rice started running a lot of the routes that Kelce used to run. Now that Rashee Rice has gone down, maybe Kelsey's going to pick it up because no one's running his routes anymore. I mean, we'll see, right? Because now they just signed Hopkins, and that's a whole other ball game. But anyway, let's circle back. I want to try to keep this on the wide receivers and the injuries because there were a lot of injuries to wide receivers this week. So we had Ayuk going out for season. We had Chris Godwin going out for, you have to assume, season. Evans is going to miss at least 3 weeks. Harrison took another nasty shot, but I guess he's still okay. I don't know the plus sign. Metcalf's possibly going to be out. He's a normal wide receiver one. So a lot of wide receiver ones picking up plus signs this week, which means a lot of people had to go to waivers to pick up.
Did we say Ayuk?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So a lot of people had to go to waivers to, find wide receiver help. So if we look, So we've got Romeo Doubs, Juwan Jennings, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rashad Bateman, Tyler Lockett. 5 guys picked up on waivers, and then since then I actually ended up dropping Lockett for Cedric Tillman, which is another guy I think is going to benefit huge from a quarterback change. But yeah, so with all the injuries to wide receiver, is there any, and you guys may not want to share this, is there anyone who's still on waivers that you think might be worth picking up at wide receiver now that so many have gone down? I'll go first. I'll talk about Tillman. So I debated about this pick for a long time because I was going to talk about it on the podcast, and I decided, you know what, I had to have him. So if you look at the timestamp, I actually picked him up about 45 minutes before we started recording. I just think that Cedric Tillman has a chance to step into the Amari Cooper role. His first game in that role, 8 grabs on 12 targets. And I'm a huge target guy. And now he's got a real quarterback because he's got famous Jameis throwing it to him. And I say real quarterback from a fantasy standpoint, right? Like the Browns aren't going to win anything with Jameis Winston. But the Browns haven't scored 20 points in a game yet this season. The only team that hasn't scored 20. I think with Jameis throwing the ball, sure, they're going to throw some pick sixes, but they also have a chance to actually complete some passes and get some yards. And I think Tillman kind of takes the spot of Amari Cooper. And I'm hoping to get lucky with this to fill in for Mike Williams for a couple of weeks. But what about you guys? What do you guys think? Are there any wide receivers out there that you think, for all the people that are have injuries? Because I know, Mitch, you picked up Jackson Smith and Jigma for the same reason, right? Like you picked up a guy to fill in. Are there anyone left on waivers that maybe you're not interested in, but other people might?
I specifically. Oh, sorry. Go on. Go, Vinny.
No, go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I specifically picked the Jackson Smith and Bigbo because I also have Metcalf who's hurt. So if Metcalf doesn't play, that's a game time switch. A lot of times, if you have different playing times on Sundays of your wide receivers, you don't know if they're in or out yet. Does that make sense? So
yeah, for
Jackson
sure.
Smith and Jigba is in the same game. So that's why I went with him. The other one I was thinking of is I think someone grabbed Dobbs. I was going for Dobbs, but I drafted Dobbs, so I'm obviously a little biased towards him. And then I had Keon Coleman as well. I drafted. So I'm not afraid to play a lot of these wide receivers. Same reason why Miles dropped Olave, because he would rather have the opportunity. I didn't want the opportunity to play these waiver wires receivers every week because I'd rather have Godwin. But I mean, if you look on the waivers, I for sure I agree with you. Like who in Tampa Bay is going to take over? Even Tolbert from Dallas is pretty steady. Shakir's a number 1 target for Buffalo. I mean, we don't even know who's going to be picked up in San Fran, if it's Pearsall or Jennings. I guess Jennings did get picked up. And then also what's mind-boggling to me is like, I can't believe I have a decision when DK Metcalf is going down. If you look at the quarterbacks who are leading the league in passing attempts, like Geno Smith is passing the ball so much, and this week his 2 other wide receivers just got picked up. Like Metcalf was already on my team, but then Lockett and Jason Smith and Big Ben. I know he's been on and off teams' rosters, but it's very rare when a team is leading in passing attempts that their wide receivers on waiver wires. That I think shows the potential or the depth of the wide receivers on waivers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, counterpoint, Bo Nix
agree.
is also one of the top passing attempts, and if anyone's starting a Broncos wide receiver, you're losing. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but yeah, I think, and then Vinny, I guess if you want to chime in, or just quick additional question to you, any thoughts about the guys who were dropped this week? Oh, hold on, let me go to just free agents. So a couple named receivers dropped this week: Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Josh Downs. Any thoughts on those guys as well?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think our league is always wide receiver heavy in the free agent pool. Just because of the value of running backs and yeah, I think there's a lot of value. Yeah, and it's not a PPR league. I think there's a lot of value here. I was just looking, I was like, it's crazy that there's not a single Carolina Panther, Indianapolis Colt wide receiver that's on a roster right now. Chargers, so you can kind of go down this list. And then, you just picked up Tillman, but before you did, there wasn't a single Cleveland wide receiver. So it is kind of interesting. Like there's definitely going to be somebody. The problem is always trying to figure out who that somebody is, right? And like you dabbled on Lockett versus Tillman. So yeah, you can go down this list. You can find somebody, but is it the right person?
Yeah, and to go over the Lockett pick. So Lockett's a guy who's going to get you 7 fantasy points. That's what he does, right? He's going to catch 5 passes for 60-something yards and get you 6-7 fantasy points every week. That's what he does. He's a safe pick. The reason I went with Tillman is Tillman might get me 1, but he might get me 15. And I'm in a position where I would rather, take a shot at that, given that I'm getting out, Mike Evans back in 4 weeks. If Evans was going to be out long term, I might play differently. But like I'd rather go for the home run, and that's why I made that decision. As far as the Panthers not having anyone on a roster, it's just quarterback play. Like let's look at the games where Dalton plays: 18 fantasy points, 14 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, 1 bad game. Right with the 4 games with Dalton, he had 1 bad game. I don't count this because Dalton got hurt. But it's like outside of those 4 games, and now they've gone back to Bryce Young. So like there's no value here because the games with Bryce Young, bad catch rate, bad yardage, just bad.
Just bad.
Yeah, just bad. So yeah, it's crazy that there's really talented guys out there, and obviously, you know, Brake doesn't listen to this podcast, and I hope he doesn't listen this week because he's playing against me and he needs a wide receiver. But yeah, still some value on waivers. A lot of injuries this week. Not just wide receivers, but also injuries to quarterback, as I mentioned. Andy Dalton hurt his thumb. Aiden O'Connell hurt his hand for the Raiders. Not that hurts or helps the Raiders in any way because we're bad anyway. And then obviously Watson going down with his injury, which I think is a benefit to the players on Cleveland. You did mention there's no Cleveland wide receivers on a team, but that's until I picked up Tillman. Well, that's a little unfair to say, right? Because Amari Cooper was on a team and Njoku is on a team. So there were 2 pass catchers from the Cleveland Browns on a fantasy roster, whereas there are 0 pass catchers from either the Chargers or the Panthers on a roster.
Panthers and Colts.
Or the Broncos. Does anyone have a Broncos receiver?
Yeah, I'm trying to research this as you're talking to. Sorry, Alex.
Courtland Sutton right here. I mean, you know, Courtland.
No, I
Sutton,
don't. No.
You know,
So no Panthers, no Chargers, no Colts, no
yeah, I gotta
Broncos.
look this up more.
Oh, yeah, and then no Colt again. The Colts quarterback play is just so bad. So I had Josh Downs. So let's look at Josh Downs, right? So when you look at his stats, you're like, oh man, 8 of 9 for 82, 9 of 12, 7 of 9. These are great stats. Those are the games where Joe Flacco was the starter. The games where he plays with the hot garbage that is the current quarterback.
Anthony Richardson.
3 of 5, 1 of 3. I mean, I started him this week against Vinny. Got 0 fantasy points, right? He played the entire game, only had 3 targets, 0 fantasy points against Miami. This is a bad football team.
What I'm about to say might be a little too early, predicated on, you know, seasons are built on, like, you know, defenses are flying early because they're all healthy, and when they get banged up, offenses get rolling and more in sync, so they might be better second half of the year. But if you do it on pace versus 2023, there's only 2023 was so top heavy or whatever. I think that's why this one's more spread out. The average, there's 12 to 14 guys who are getting over 10 points a week of wide receivers. Whereas, so I feel like it's more bunched in. There's not really wide receivers who are getting 16, 17 points a week like they were last year. Because if I think CeeDee Lamb, Hill, and Amon Ra were all above 13 points a week last year, at least in our DoD league they were, and point PPR they were much higher. So I'm guessing it's just maybe because the top heavy is not so top that it seems like the wide receivers are deeper, but maybe that's just me pulling that out of left field.
Well, let's take a look at the actual stats then. So we're looking at just the actual how many fantasy points players have. So when we look at the wide receivers, you know, the top one is 96. If you go down,
and we're on week 8 right now. Week 7's done. We're going to week 8. So
wide receiver 12 is Scary Terry McLaurin at 65. That's a what is that, a 30-something% difference, like from 96 to 65? That's a huge difference in points.
That's true.
To get to the top 10. Not even top 10, right?
That's true.
Or sorry, top 12.
Yeah.
So like this is, you know, this is wide here and up is wide receiver 1 territory, and your wide receiver 1, it's very top heavy. So now let's go from the 12, which is 65, down to 12 more.
It's all close there, yeah.
So now it's 50. So there's a 15-point gap between the wide receiver 12 and wide receiver 24. So you're you know, between a wide receiver 1 and 2 is 15 points, whereas up here at the top, huge.
So maybe
difference.
it's more top heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you look at like the top heaviness too, I mean, you've got Chase and Jefferson, and then Alex and I's boy Drake London.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you ask people before the season who would be up here, they would pick Chase, they would pick Jefferson, they wouldn't have picked Godwin. Obviously, Vinny and I picked our boy Drake London. Mitch said most people wouldn't. You wouldn't have picked Brian Thomas Jr. You probably wouldn't have picked Jalen Reed or maybe Nico Collins. He had a good year, so we'll give him that. You wouldn't have picked Alan Lazard. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of guys who are still up here that you wouldn't have picked.
Nico being that high, missing the last 2 weeks plus an injury in the other game is like insane. Like, he was on a phenomenal pace.
Well, and I think he and CJ Stroud and that's another wide receiver injury didn't happen this week, so we didn't cover. But I think he and Stroud are just like in lockstep together because the Texans have looked actively bad on offense without him. Not their running game, you know, Joe Mixon's still killing it, but their passing game without Nico Collins, which still has guys like Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz were all quality players. Like they have quality players at receiver, but for whatever reason, they just do not click without Nico Collins out there, which is strange. But a lot of plus signs.
They looked really bad. They looked really bad. I just want to bring a topic up that we have talked about kind of offline, but it's not tooting horns. It's more of just like, I was a little bit confused anyways. Were the waivers 1 week too late, where last week you had guys like Waddle and Olave on waivers, and then we have the injuries this week and we're having this conversation? Because, in my text message group, I was just like, I can't believe, as bad as my wide receiver 2's position has been, that a guy like Olave and Waddle, hopefully Tua coming back from injury with Carr coming back, you would imagine that Olave has to regress towards normal. Like, he's not going to be that bad the rest of the year. I could be wrong, but would you have picked those guys up, the two of you, over who you ended up picking up this week?
I'll go first. I wouldn't have, but that's because I need someone who plays now. So if you go to my team, so I picked up Rashad Bateman this week. I picked up Cedric Tillman this week. I didn't have another wide receiver on my roster outside of Josh Downs, who I dropped. So had someone like Olave been available, it would have been great to pick him up, but unless I knew that he and Carr were playing and healthy, I can't start him this week. I'd rather take a risk on Bateman, or Tillman, but because I'm desperate. Now, if I had a place to stash him on the bench, that's a different story, right? If I knew between Singletary and Tracy who's going to be the guy, I think it's going to be Tracy, but I'm not sure. If I knew who's going to be the guy in New York, I could cut the other one and then stash a player like Olave until Carr comes back. Then yes, I'd be on board with that. But I need a guy who's going to play this week.
Great question, Benny, but I don't think you're going to like my answer. I don't know. So the Waddle one is interesting to me because they're going to want to bring Tua back. So you having Waddle is kind of interesting. I would have considered Waddle, I'll be honest. Olave, I just no chance. I don't know if when Carr comes back, are they keeping him back? I don't know that whole situation with their whole drafted quarterback and Rattler. But let's pretend right now Olave was on the waivers and you didn't have him. I'm telling you right now, I would rather have DeMario Douglas, Jalen McMillan, Tolbert, Shakir, and maybe Christian Kirk. He'd be right there with Christian Kirk and Keon Coleman.
Well, and I think Mitch is in the same situation as me, right? Because he lost Godwin for the season, if Metcalf can't play this week, he's also in a position where he had to have a guy who's going to play this week.
Oh, that's why I took Smith and Jigba. Yeah, so not even that's right, Alex. Sorry, Thank you for reminding me. We can't compare them because I need Njigba to be because of the start time of Metcalf. But you're saying if Olave was on there, I might have done another way. I tried for Romeo Dobbs, but I think Chris grabbed him. Yeah, I would. I mean, I think he dropped Deontay Johnson, which is very interesting between those two. Deontay had one bad week because Dalton looked like the old Dalton of old, but Deontay Johnson could be back to normal again if Dalton just has a normal game. But I'm telling you, I like the upside. McMillan, I know this is probably not going to age well depending on how McMillan does over the next 3 weeks if he's not even in the Tampa Bay offense. You're like, you almost took McMillan over Olave. I get it, but just because we're talking now this week, I would rather take the upside of McMillan. I would rather, with the amount Dallas is passing the ball, I think I'd rather have Tolbert than Olave, and I definitely would rather have Shakir. So I don't think Olave is on the board. Waddle seems to be interesting to me. Chris might have abandoned on Waddle a little bit early, but he had such good wide receivers. Waddle isn't even going to be. Let's say Tua comes back and they're playing like they were last year. I don't even think full potential Waddle makes it into against Neighbors and Chris's other wide receiver, London. Chris London has got Neighbors and London. I don't think a full Tua, healthy Tua, Waddle even cracks into that starting receiver. So I get why Chris did it. It is interesting that you have him and you get to play the long game. But I'm not too jealous to have those wide receivers.
Yeah.
And I'm with completely fair points. It was just as we talked about the injuries.
Yep. No, definitely.
Yeah, I also would have taken Jalen McMillan over Olave like I was in that situation, just because same thing. I need a guy who's going to play now, and I think there's a chance. That's the one. I was debating between Tillman and McMillan based on, like I said, target share, snap percentage. That's another thing. Tillman played 82% of the snaps this week with Amari Cooper out, so that's another reason I like Tillman. So snap percentage, target share. Actual catch rate, things like that is why I made the choice. However, if after next week Tillman does nothing and McMillan is a world beater because he took Godwin's spot, I will be a little salty about that, for sure. But yeah, I was trying to bring up Chris's team here. I am curious. Did Chris know that Andy Dalton was no longer going to be the starter when he dropped Deontay Johnson?
I have no idea, but he did not. He didn't.
'Cause I didn't read about that until today about but I mean I don't follow Panthers because they're not fantasy relevant to me because I don't. Outside of Deontay Johnson, there's not a fantasy relevant player on the team, and I guess Chuba Hubbard, but like, so I don't really follow Panthers news, so I didn't know about it until today. So I'm curious if that was news before, because it was on ESPN today. So I wonder if he knew, or if he just decided, you know, I'm cutting this, because like you said, he's got London and Neighbors. You're never not starting these two guys as long as they're healthy.
Exactly.
Let's see, they do have bye still, right? Because they haven't had their bye yet. So yeah,
London, so holding 12. Deontay is a little bit different than I was kind of comparing it to holding Waddle and eating a roster spot for a month type of thing.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna need at least, you know, one more receiver on the team, which ironically it looks like. Oh, this is back to my team. Sorry, let me go back to Chris. It looks like he ended up keeping Tank Dell, which he picked up Dobbs, so that makes sense. That makes more sense then for the roster move. But it is interesting that he decided to roll the dice on Tank Dell, who, like I said, you know, first week without Nico Collins, you know, good, but only because of a touchdown. This week against Green Bay, which is, you know, high-powered offense, it was a shootout of a game, 4 targets, no grabs.
Yeah, they both had bad games, both QBs.
So, yeah, actually, it was a very defensive game for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think interesting points. I think it's to me, it's just interesting. I'm a big. I know you guys are advocates of targets, and I am too, Alex. But I'm a big advocate of like, what have you done in the past as well? And so like knowing that Olave's broke 1,000 yards and had somewhere around like 5 touchdowns a year. Waddle's had 2 or 3 really good seasons back to back when Tua's the quarterback. You guys are looking at potential upside, and I'm looking at, you know, things that have actually been done in the past. So it's an interesting play, but I understand the take of I need someone this week, which is very fair.
Yeah,
but also shameless plug. If Adam does listen to this week, I have a lot of wide receivers, so just let me know.
Yeah, and I will say I think roster construction is a big part of it too, right? About what you take, because I hear what you're saying. Like if I had the ability to stash an Olave, I do like the upside. I mean, you guys know me. I usually draft one of the oldest teams in the league. Not necessarily this year, but I'm known for that. I draft older players because they're more reliable, and that's what I like to do. I mean, I drafted Tony Gonzalez till he was 70, until they finally said I couldn't do it anymore. So, you know, I do that. But in my case, I've got CeeDee Lamb. He's kind of a rock on my team. Like, yeah, he has not been the stud I wanted him to be, but I expect him to get me 8 to 12 fantasy points a week. I can chalk that up, right? So I've got the safe pick. I'm trying to find the home run to go next to him, which is what Evans was supposed to be, the boomer bust type player. I'm trying to find someone to fill the boomer bust role that Evans filled for me. So that's why I made the decision I did. If it were the other way around and I already had the boomer bust player, like let's say Evans was healthy and Lamb was the one that was hurt, then it might have changed the mindset on whether I went on Olave because he's more of a safer pick. But well, with Carr playing, but yeah, that's why I went that way. I think it's not just player preference, but also what your roster needs at the time and roster construction. In your case, your roster's popping off, they're playing great right now. You can afford to stash an Olave because it doesn't hurt you to do that, right? You've got Thomas is one of the top wide receivers. I think it's like number 3 or number 4, and AJ Brown would be if he played every week. Like if you take out the weeks he didn't play, he's averaging 15.5 fantasy points a game in the 3 games he's played. So, you know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Completely makes sense. I actually woke up in the middle of the night to see what ended up happening with waivers, and so I also got really lucky that I feel like I got the number 1 waiver selection this week in Brandon Audrey dropping my kicker, who was also top 5 for hopefully this year's Justin Tucker. So I was super stoked about that. Thank God for the wide receiver injuries.
Yeah, everyone's going for wide receivers this week. And then
I think Adam had the best waiver wire, but he just didn't play the waiver.
Yeah, I mean, I really, like I said, I don't want him to listen to the podcast because he's playing me, but it's like, I mean, it sucks for me that he gets to start Hopkins, right? Because Hopkins was going to be useless, and now he's on the Chiefs, which we'll get to that in a second. But it's like, Williams, he's probably going to be suspended, projected to get 0. IR, and he hasn't dropped any of them. So, like, he's going to have to pick up somebody. I hope whoever he picks up, he guesses wrong. Like, all those guys
Adam,
we evaluated, I hope he guesses
listen
wrong.
to the podcast, put in a waiver for Deontay Johnson. Drop by you.
I hope he guesses wrong.
Oh, he's playing me. He's playing me this week. Of course, I hope he guesses wrong.
Speaking of the Chiefs, you guys want a fun trivia question? Last time a QB was 5-0 with more interceptions than touchdowns was who and what? And they won the Super Bowl.
I mean, my guess would be
Trent Dilfer.
Eli Manning.
Nope. Good guesses. But the last time, I don't think Eli Manning ever went 5-0. Last time a QB was 5-0 with more interceptions than touchdowns was 2015 Peyton Manning, and they won the Super Bowl.
You know what makes me maddest about that stat? I almost guessed Peyton Manning because that would have made more sense for being 5-0. But I was like, nah, Peyton wouldn't have more picks than TDs, so I changed to brother Eli. I almost had it right. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, you were close to the brother. But I thought that was fascinating. That's just Mahomes here again, just not doing well in fantasy, but is just the most valuable player in the league still somehow.
Is he though, or is his defense just that good? Also, let's look at who they've played, right? So like Baltimore, great team. Natty played awful week 2, so I'm not going to give him too much credit for that, even though Natty's good now. They were not good week 2. Chargers aren't good. New Orleans, they played without Breeze. I guess the Niners were supposed to be a good team I was having there. So like they haven't had like the hardest schedule, and it's not about to get any harder. They get to play Vegas. That's a freebie. Which, by the way, in our Pick'em League, I'm a Raider fan. I pick them to win every week, no matter what. I'm one of only 1% of players in Pick'em who picked the Raiders to beat the Chiefs this week. And I imagine all the others either misclicked or were desperate to catch up, so they're making desperation picks already. They get to play the Bucks, who are going to be down a lot of people, 2 weeks from now. They get to play the Broncos, who are bad. So like they get to play Carolina, who's bad. There's a world where the Chiefs are undefeated going into their bye week, or not going into their bye. They were ahead of the bye. Sorry, undefeated going into like our fantasy playoffs, and that could affect whether or not he would be a starter for people in fantasy playoffs. Not Chris. He's not making the fantasy playoffs, I don't think. Sorry, Chris. But leagues where people have Mahomes, that could be a thing because like there's the only game that I see in their upcoming schedule, like. Besides Buffalo, who's beating them? Vegas, the Bucks, who are missing a bunch of people.
That's interesting.
The Broncos, the Panthers, Vegas again.
How
the
did
Chargers,
they get that
the Browns.
schedule?
Like they don't have another hard matchup until the fantasy Super Bowl, which is Houston. So kind of an interesting thing.
That's crazy. And if there's one thing that we know about the Raiders and Patrick Mahomes, if you're listening to this, trade for Patrick Mahomes now. He will inevitably throw for 5 touchdowns this week.
Yeah, if you're looking to buy low on Mahomes, this is the week to do it because, more picks than TDs. So now's the time to make that offer to try to swindle somebody, see if they'll make the trade so you can start on this week against the Raiders. Again, Raider fan, I hope we win, but I'm a realist and I'm still picking us. I'd still bet on it. If we were in Vegas right now, I'd run it back and I'd bet on the Raiders to win again because that's what I do. I'm a fan, means fanatic. I represent, but
not trying to make this a tight end podcast, but does Hopkins affect Kelsey at all in the same way that, leaving or getting a wide receiver helps your tight ends targets?
Let's go into that. So next topic was going to be trades. So we'll start there. So a lot of trade rumors going around. We kind of touched on it last episode, what trades might be happening. Some trades actually have happened or are in talks. This one's been in talks, in quotes, all day. Allegedly, it is going to be a 5th round pick, conditionally a 4th round pick, if he plays 60% or more of the snaps for the rest of the season. Hopkins to the Chiefs. Does it benefit Kelsey? I'm going to say yes, but not right away. I think it's going to take him some time to get acclimated to the offense. He's got to learn the offense, get out there, develop a rapport with Patrick Mahomes. However, once that happens and there's another legitimate threat at wide receiver, that's going to free up, I think, some of the coverages for Kelsey, specifically in his routes over the middle of the field. The safeties that used to sit on him are now might be having to cover Hopkins deep instead of sitting in the middle of the field, which might open up some room for Kelsey. So long-term, yes. Short-term, I don't think it matters yet, is my guess. Vinny, what about you?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I I think, I was kind of thinking along the same lines of, okay, yeah, obviously now there's going to be target competition. It does, Kelsey's been the focal point. One thing that I think, that I actually wasn't even considering in our conversation earlier, the Chiefs hasn't scored more than 30 points all year. Just having a guy that can actually help you move the chains and score points inevitably means that your offense is on the field for longer drives, more plays, and have the potential to score more touchdowns, which obviously is where Travis Kelsey thrives. I don't think they've dominated a game offensively at any point in time. They've been hurting at wide receiver. Their offense looks not great. So I think even if Hopkins does steal targets, he makes the Chiefs offense better, which inevitably is going to lift players like Kareem Hunt and Pacheco when he comes back, and Travis Kelsey.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're missing
Mahomes
their
is
wide
so
receiver
good.
one and their running back one, right? Like, that's going to hurt your offense regardless. Go ahead, Mitch.
No, I was just saying that's interesting. It's like so like is Hopkins could not necessarily do well individually, but as a whole make Mahomes better as a fantasy just because of the more times to move the chains. I like that a lot. No, that's good.
Yeah, my only caveat is going to be, we kind of talked about this, Vinny. What have you done for me lately? Right, like you and I talked, like you were talking about earlier. You like players that get the job done, and when he was in Houston, he absolutely got the job done. His first year in Arizona in 2020, he absolutely got the job done. Since then, since his first season in Arizona, he got hurt and didn't play a full season, and even the 10 games he played, not a good stat line. He had good TDs, but receiving yards were terrible. They only played 9 games, so less games the next season, not a good stat line. His yardage came up, but his TDs went way down. His next year, which is his first year in Tennessee, he was fine. 75 for 1,007 TDs, like that. You're happy with that. But if you actually had him on your roster last year, you'll know that of these 7 3Ds, he had at least one 3-touchdown game, and then I want to say 2 TD games. So these 7 TDs were across 3 games, right? The rest of the other 14 games of the schedule, he wasn't bringing in any balls. It was all conglomerated in one spot. So it wasn't like he was doing you a lot of favors all season. So even this season's kind of mid, and then so far this year he's been abysmal. So like, is he the same player that he was in 2020? Because look, 4 years is a long time for a professional athlete, right? It doesn't seem like a lot when you're discussing some things, but when you're discussing a professional athlete, especially in football, where the average career is only 2.5 years. I mean, granted, great players play longer than that, obviously, but the average career for a professional football player is 2.5 years. Are we really saying that 4 years removed from his last really quality season, he's going to be the same guy?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting stake. And actually, Alex, I pulled it up. He had 1, 2, 3, 4 games. Oh, 72. 5 games above 70 yards receiving last year. He had a 3-touchdown game, and then 4 1-touchdown games.
Okay, so it was a little better than I thought, but still, yeah. So like,
but on a per game basis, you're right. It was actually terrible. Like he had a 130 and 3 touchdowns, one game with 140 yards, another game with like 130 and a touchdown. He was not scoring you fantasy points on a weekly basis. He was like a 6'4", 4'6", 20 type guy.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point that I was trying to make. Now, granted, we're talking about whether it's going to help the Chiefs, but again, if you look at his last 3 seasons, in 2 of the last 3 seasons, he's missed significant time due to injury, and he's currently injured, questionable, lower leg, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, it's a guy who's older. He's been injured, 32, which, to me, I'm an old fart. I'm 40, so I wish I was 32. But as an NFL guy, you usually want guys that don't have a 3 at the start of their age, right? So, something to think about. All right, let's move on to any other trades that happened or are rumored to happen that we want to discuss. I know Chris had thrown it out in the chat, but I'll let you guys, if you have anything you want to talk about before we go to that.
Well, I do know that Adams and Cooper, I think, were after our last week's podcast, or did we get like really a chance to talk about them? I think we talked about them a little bit actually, but
yeah, I mean, the fun thing about Adams is that in the last 8 days, he managed to lose to the Steelers, get traded to the Jets, and lose to the Steelers again. So, not the best 8-day stretch for Davante Adams.
No. Or my we text these together, but my favorite was Davante Adams went from 2-5 to 2-5, but with the homies. Like that to me is just classic. It's all time. And not only that, they got absolutely pounded by the Steelers. So, and Adams was terrible. I don't think Rodgers is who he used to be. So it is funny to like one out and then to force your way into a bad situation.
Yeah.
As the resident Roger fanatic and lover myself, I know my Rodgers and I know what years he'll be good, and it's predicated on the offensive line. It's always been that way. If you go back to our first podcast, I just kept complaining and complaining about the Band-Aid offensive line that is the Jets, and they've lost two linemen. They can't keep it together. And I understand Rodgers' age and the knee injury, but Cousins, as much as I don't like to say it, seems to be doing fine, healthy injury. So Rodgers is just not playing well. And with that defense too, they should be doing better performances. I know my Rodgers, and he just doesn't look like the Rodgers I once knew. So that's why I don't like bashing on him because he's forever one of my favorite players. But it's just not the same quarterback.
It was, and it's like I said, when you have to go back to 2020 for when they were popping off, like, look, 2020, Rodgers was amazing, 48 TDs, 5 picks. 2021, still solid, 37 TDs, 4 picks. But let's look from there. 2022, he played every single game, threw less than 4,000 yards, had 12 picks. Last year, he played one play. This year, 10 TDs, already 7 picks. If you look at his career, the most picks he'd ever thrown since 2010 was 8, and he's already got 7 this season, right? In the last 14 years, the most interceptions he's had is 8, and he's already at 7. So he's not the same guy. Kind of like what's wrong with Hopkins. Is Hopkins still the same guy? We'll see. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but since we're talking about quarterbacks and we mentioned the Steelers, Russell Wilson, I think we were all kind of thought it was crazy that they decided to bench decided to bench Justin Fields and go with Russell Wilson this week, and he got him the dub. Now, the completion percentage is still bad. I think they would have still beat the Jets with Justin Fields playing, but interesting that everyone's like on this Russell Wilson bandwagon now just because like one game. But yeah, we'll see how that works out. Anyway,
the two other potential, we were talking also, I knew someone was going to go to the Chiefs. I think I said Thielen on last week's podcast. So the two that are most potentially likely going to go this week, it's going to be Kupp and it's going to be Mike Williams. So I would be interested to know where Kupp's going to go and Mike Williams is going to go. If they go to anyone relevant, they could, once again, Nolan doesn't need another league winner. But if Kupp goes to the Chargers, how do you feel about that? Because that's the biggest rumors. Or if the Chiefs aren't done and they still grab Thielen or Mike Williams, I'm just curious on what team needs the actual wide receiver still now. That's what I'm wondering. If you try and identify who the buyer is or the wide receiver, then you look at the best available wide receiver. It seems to be Kupp. I forget what show I was watching, but they were saying that the Stafford trades was all smoke and mirrors to the media of the Rams actually trying to move Kupp. Stafford's not going to move out of LA or whatever, and he's going to be done after this year, and he wants to retire with his family. The whole Stafford talk I was reading is smoke and mirrors to Kupp actually getting to be finalized. They were going to finalize him like 5-6 weeks ago, but then he got hurt, apparently, is the story. So they knew Stafford was going to be done at this end of the year. They were going to try and trade Kupp for as much value. Then he gets hurt, and that's where we're at. So I'm just curious on is Kupp's best value with Stafford? If he goes anywhere else, it's a lower value, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think his best value is with Stafford just because, like, look, the one game he was healthy and played this year, 14 grabs, 21 targets, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Stafford has gone on record that he doesn't relate well to a lot of the other guys on the team because they're just so much younger than he is. Kupp's in his 30s, so he and Stafford can get along better than Stafford's going to get along with guys who are 23, right? That's just human nature, right? So I think it's really hard to think he's going to go somewhere else and have as much value as what he has been able to do with Stafford at the helm. But if he's really this good of a player, which, everyone thinks he is, then he'll probably still be fine. But when players change teams, you never know, right? Because, like, what if it's a team that decides to bring him in? Because there's some head-scratcher trades in the NFL sometimes, and you're like, they didn't need that one. Did they bring that in? Well, because it still makes their team better and better for winning an NFL championship, not necessarily better from a fantasy perspective. We want the stats. You know what I mean? There have definitely been times where, like, someone will, like, when the Browns first signed Kareem Hunt, when they already had Nick Chubb, It's like, well, that makes no sense. Nick Chubb is killing it. Why would you sign Kareem Hunt, right? From a fantasy perspective, that wasn't good for fantasy owners. Where I'm not, they still didn't do great, but like it wasn't good for fantasy owners to have to split carries. But from a team perspective, they got to rest Chubb, they got to have a good backup, they have a good ebb and flow with two guys, and they had two quality players, and they did well for a few years with that scenario. So I think it's more like that, where there are going to be trades that could happen with Kupp, where he goes to a team and they don't ask him to be the guy, they ask him to be the slot receiver or whatever. And that just really elevates them. As far as what team might be in the market for wide receiver right now, I mean, if they're trying to win this year, the Bucks, right? Cooper Kupp come in, take the Godwin
That's
spot.
exactly what I was just gonna say, Alex.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of the Bucks about being a buyer until Mitch asked that question. I was like, holy crap! Like Kupp is Godwin. Like they're the same person.
Yeah. Kupp comes in, takes the Godwin role. Go ahead, Ben.
It'd be it would just be perfect. I mean, it needs to be somebody who is competing. I don't think the Steelers get a wide receiver that helps their value. I think it helps their team, and then you look at the list, it's like the Chiefs, maybe the 49ers now, but I don't see the 49ers trading picks with the Rams. For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think if Kupp goes anywhere, it's Steelers, maybe Cowboys and Bucks.
Or Chargers, or I'm hearing Chargers as well.
Yeah, Chargers I guess makes sense, but that just to me just tells me that the Chargers are a little delusional. I don't think they're a good football team. I think they're a good defense. So if they're trading for Cooper Kupp to make a run at the playoffs, like that's just wild to me. And that they just
I just don't understand.
That'd be the same bad management they've had
Herbert
forever.
all smoke and mirrors, or is it just because he has no help? Because like for a long time, Herbert was like a good fantasy quarterback. Like, and you're like, oh man, Herbert's something. Kind of like Phillip Rivers. It's like, man, Rivers wasn't the problem in San Diego. Herbert wasn't the problem in San Diego. Well, you look at this year, it's like, all right, well, what's the problem then? Because they're just not scoring. He's had one multi-touchdown game this season. He's played six games.
Look at his 3-year average, or look at his stats. Like he hasn't been good for years. Like he is smoking mirrors. That's the point I was. He was great his rookie year, his second year.
That's what I'm. Yeah. So if you look at 2021 and 2022, they were both solid. Although 2022, his TDs took a huge dip. 2023 was terrible. You know what I mean? So I just think it doesn't help that they have nothing. Like he's got no tight end, he's got no wide receivers. They let Keenan Allen go for a reason, right? But yeah. So would a wide receiver help him? Sure. Is that going to turn the Chargers into a good offense again? I don't think so.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what Flacco did under Greg Roman's offenses with the Ravens many 3, 4, or 5 years ago before they had. That'd be interesting to see the similarities, because maybe it's not necessarily Herbert is that bad right now, but it's the type of offense that they're locking him into. Is he's not going to have numbers ever in this offense. But that'd be interesting. Maybe I'm wrong. Flacco had great numbers under Greg Roman.
350.
Flacco's been a beast everywhere. Sorry,
that's true.
350 yards and 0 touchdowns is the most Justin Herbert stat line like ever. It's like what he did all year last year. So. Yeah, I think he's a smoke and mirrors guy.
Right, like the 350. This is a great stat line. Like not going to touch on such, but look at every other game: 144, 130, 125, 179. That's 4 straight games to open the season without breaking 200 yards passing. That's bad.
Is that Herbert or Deshaun Watson?
That was Herbert. Justin Fields just lost his starting job, and even he broke 200 a couple of times, 245, 312. Like. Even he did that, and he just lost his job for it. So, I'd have to scroll pretty far to find Deshaun Watson. I'll just search for him.
No, I think he's like also like 190. I don't think.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just curious now.
I don't think he broke 200 a single time this year.
He did not. He never broke 200. He got close though. $1.96. He almost got there. Poor guy.
What was the year that Herbert did really good? What year was it? Is it rookie
21.
year or second year?
His second
21?
year.
21 was his best year. 22 he had a good year passing yards wise, but not a whole lot of touchdowns. But 22 was his first big disappointment because I think he got drafted as like a top 5 fantasy quarterback, and then
because he was coming off a 5,000-yard, 38 touchdown season, right?
Yeah,
and the yards were still there, right? Like
4,700
is still a banger year for yards, but the TDs dropped from 38 to 25. So
yeah.
Look, you can see it's 100 fantasy point difference between year 1 and 2. He also had 100 more yards rushing and rushing. So yeah, not 1 and 2, but between so 383 his rookie year, 441 his second year. Since then, 315, 263. it's just going down and down and down.
So the coordinator for that year was Brandon Staley, and Brandon Staley is with the Niners as an assistant play caller there. So maybe it had to do with maybe he just hasn't had anyone good enough. I don't know. That's a good question. It's hard to diagnose Herbert because he seems to look the part and he's got the skills, but just the numbers aren't matching.
All right, little tangent there. Any other trade rumors before I want to go into our last topic here? Any other trade rumors?
Trade rumors? No.
Okay.
No. I do think we talked about it last week. I do think it'll be interesting to see like if Kamara gets traded or if like the Cowboys pick anybody up. Some of those teams that are kind of in need of a running back, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I haven't heard any rumors on that, so TBD.
All right, so we're gonna give a shout out to listener Chris, as this was his. Actually, no. Before I do this, one more thing. Scores this week. If you scored 97 or more points, you won. Except for 2 people that scored 97 and didn't. The fact that 3 people scored 97 and got a dub, Mitch and Matt, that's got to hurt to score that many and not get the W. But it was just a high scoring week overall when you look at it. Like,
have you seen the video where Barkley's being asked on the sideline?
Yeah.
Do you want the 13 extra yards to get your career? And he's like, no, let the young kids eat. And I was like, no, you can get those 13 yards, bro. It's okay. You can get those.
But yeah, just a crazy high scoring week. So like, we had Miles drop 90 and lose. We had you two score 97. Neither of you won. We had Luis drop 100 and lose. And I only scored 83 with a guy getting 0. But like, let's assume that he gets the average 10 points or whatever he'd been averaging before this week. That's still 93 and loses. I'm not boosting myself. I'm just saying like there were a lot of high scoring weeks. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 teams break the century mark this week, and another 4 teams break 90. So very high scoring week as compared to like last week where it was a much more low scoring week across the board. So
that's really fun. That's really good for everybody else in the league last week or 2 weeks ago. It's great. I score 101 and lose. So that's your example that you give.
Sure. Okay, well, we can focus on that. Well, you beat me this week. I'm not happy about it. All right, so let's go. Last topic of the day, sent in by listener Chris. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to play a little game called Start, Bench, Cut. I'm going to give you 3 players from your team. You have to tell me which one you're starting, which one you're benching, and which one you're cutting. Now, obviously, I'm going to try to give you all decent players to make the game fun. So, like, I know you wouldn't actually be benching or cutting a lot of these guys, but just if you're trying to build your roster based on either what you have on the bench or what's available in free agency or just what you feel is the best long-term value, which one of these guys you're starting, benching, or cutting. Mitch, we're going to start with you. I'm going to give you 3 names. I'm going to give you Josh Allen at quarterback, Saquon Barkley at running back, and I'm still going to give you Chris Godwin at wide receiver, but we're going to assume he's healthy. So for the sake of the game, let's assume Chris Godwin was still healthy and playing. So you have to start one, bench one, and cut one between Allen, Barkley, and Godwin. What are you going to do?
In reality, I'd cut Allen. I'd start Barkley just because you need running backs in today's NFL. And there's no way I'm benching Godwin, so I don't know. It doesn't work with those 3. But yeah,
that's the point. That's the point of the game. You have to make a hard decision. That's the whole point of the game.
I'll bench Godwin because Evans a dirty TD stealer. Barkley I need because you need the running back production this year, and I'd cut Allen.
All right.
I'd cut everyone on my team, to be honest, except for Barkley and Godwin. So let's be real here.
Okay. Well, and Godwin already got cut.
Yeah. Godwin already got cut.
Vinny's might be a little more challenging because Vinny's roster right now is popping off a little more. You kind of went real quick on that. You didn't have to think about it. So Vinny, I'm gonna give you one. So again, start, bench, cut. We're gonna go with David Montgomery, AJ Brown, George Kittle. So I'm giving you star running back, star wide receiver, star tight end. Start, bench, cut.
Oh, that is so brutal. Man, okay. AJ Brown has been so solid since he's been back. Like he's been a true number 1. I think he finishes on a per game average in the top 4 or 5.
Alex, when he's doing this, go to game average for wide receivers. Stats.
Yeah.
Wide receivers.
I actually think 16 points a game will put him at wide receiver 1 because what was Chase 94, 96 across 7 games.
So that puts ahead of Chase at 16. Yeah.
Well, ahead of Chase and Nico Collins.
God, this is brutal. Okay. I'm gonna have to start David Montgomery just because I think he's.
And I want to say that
he's
George Kittle is also
solid.
the highest average fantasy points a game, by the way.
This is so brutal.
You're benching two guys who are actually winning you games. It's rough.
Yeah, but my running back's so thin this year. And I don't have
that's
the
part of the
luxury
game.
of like
Yeah,
a Saquon.
it's based from what roster you have. Yeah, for sure.
All right, so I'm gonna start Montgomery. I'm gonna bench AJ Brown, and I'm gonna cut Kittle.
Wow.
No, that's right. That's what I would have gone with.
It's really tough to do. It's tough, but like outside of last week, Montgomery has been very, very solid, and he got hurt, missed a couple drives, also fumbled late in the game. But outside of that, isn't he? He's like a 14-point per game running back, and I'll take that.
You know what's crazy?
All day.
He's averaged well above 10 fantasy points a game. Again, his only game not making that was last week, and like you said, he left the game hurt. He did come back in, but he missed some time. So he's averaged well over 10 points a game. CBS, he'll get 9 next week. Josh Jacobs, on the other hand, he has had 3 games 10 or more, 4, and then 3 games well below, but they think he's going to get 11.5 points. So love CBS as always for their.
They've done that. They've done that all year to Montgomery too. Like, he's got Gibbs, so we can only average like 9 points a game. I'm like, this is just wild. Like, whatever. So, but yeah, no, that was actually really good. That was good job, Alex. That was. I didn't know what you're going to go with, and I hate the 3 that you chose. So that's how I know you did well.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. Yeah, well, because I also tried to like give like different positions, right? Because like I could have given you Brian Thomas and AJ Brown, but then it's like, well, then it's easy to just say you're going to, cut one of those guys because you have 2, right? So I wanted to kind of give you both of you guys 3 different positions, and no shade to you, Mitch, but unfortunately you don't really have another guy right now that's on the same caliber as the ones I first gave you.
You don't want to give me Laporta as a choice?
No, I was looking at your team. I was like, Laporta's a high draft pick. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. I was like, Chase Brown has been good for him lately, but like, yeah, but you're going to keep Barkley over Brown. So then I go to wide receivers. I was like, okay, he's got DJ Moore, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I was like, Metcalf's done 2, 8, 3, 4. Like, no, that's not going to work. So
I do like Metcalf though. As the actual athlete, but
yeah,
next person.
But I knew Godwin versus Barkley would be a more challenging discussion than, and I kind of assumed
want something to do to your team, Alex. Right now, I could do.
Yeah, if you want to. I kind of assumed you would cut Josh Allen, but I wanted to get you on record saying you would cut Josh Allen. Just so we can keep up the Josh Allen rhetoric. All
right, we're gonna keep your favorite fantasy player of all time. We're gonna give him. Yeah, but so,
let's confer. Let's confer about this a little bit too. Okay,
I think it's got to be. I think it's got to be Cook, Jones, and Evans, right?
Yeah. Do we go Evans or we go CD?
No, we make it Evans because Evans is like Alex has taken Evans like the last 4 years in a row. I haven't had Evans in 5 years. Alex takes him every year in the 3rd round. You can count it like taxes and whatever.
I mean,
so you know what? Yeah, let's.
All right, go
Cook,
ahead.
Jones, Evans. Yeah, I'm for it.
Make Alex pick his favorite player and bench him or cut him. That's the point of this. All right, Cook, Jones, and Evans. Do you want to?
Okay, so Jones is my windmill slam start. Also, hold on. Are we assuming that Evans is healthy for this discussion?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because that changes things. Okay, so if we assume that Evans is healthy, I'm still gonna go with start Jones. I just think Jones is too good. I'm going to. I gotta bench my boy Evans, and I'm gonna cut Cook. And the reason that I'm making that decision is, I think Bruce Irving has been.
How is this manager 6-1?
I think Bruce Irving has been a very strong running back too. In his last 5 games, there's only 1 game I would have been disappointed. Right, 3, 13, 16, 10, and 8. I take all those stats from a running back too. If I look at, James Cook, and his stats. 9, 15, 3, 13. Same thing. There's only 1 game I didn't want him 3, but I'm a little more concerned with the volume. Right, 12 for 32 is not. I'm not happy about that. 9 for 39. I'm not happy about that. So I am happy with Cook on my team. While obviously starting him over Irving, but I think I have enough value in Irving taking that spot, much more so than the situation I'm in now, where I'm having to start either Rashad Bateman or Tillman over Mike Evans because he's hurt. Right, so I just think the way my roster is built right now. And those are both guys I picked up off waivers, by the way. So I had to pick up 2 waiver wide receivers this week to try to have a guy to start this week at wide receiver. So for that reason, Evans is more valuable to my team. Plus, it's more fun with the whole, I always draft Evans thing. So I always draft him. He also always gets hurt, but when he's not hurt, he plays fantastic. He had, 2 targets this week. One was a touchdown, and the other one would have been a touchdown, but he ripped his hamstring in the middle of making the catch, so he dropped the ball. Kind of wish he had finished the catch, but yeah.
We should have just had Adam on, ask who he's going to pick up and start this week for Williams, and then tell everyone in Fantasyland to start that wide receiver because it's going to be the correct call.
Dude, the thing that's going to tilt me off the face of the earth is if he picks up Tyler Lockett and starts him, and Lockett has a great game. Just because
you dropped him. Because that's fair. You have to play. You can't. We had many years ago many discussions of Matt and I doing that kind of stuff where you're hoarding, picking, dropping players on the right days of the week so other people can't start them. No, you did the right thing.
Oh no, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't sold on Tillman yet until the news came out that it was going to be James Winston starting, and that changed my mind on the. If I knew Winston was starting over DTR when waivers first happened, I would have gone for Tillman over Tyler Lockett to begin with. But because at the time I didn't know that Winston was going to start, I don't know that I trusted DTR. But anyway, we got to wrap it up. We're running out of time here, boys.
Before we wrap it up, maybe I've been going around this whole James Cook and Ray Davis thing all wrong. Does this mean that James Cook is on the block, Alex?
I mean, I'd be open to it. I would be open to it for sure. Depending on what
Chris Godwin.
Not for Chris Godwin's on waivers, so I probably wouldn't be open to Chris Godwin, But yeah, I mean, look, if you look at Ray Davis over the last couple of weeks, he had 20 totes for 97 yards. I don't like that. And then even though, James Cook was the guy this week, I don't like that he averaged, over 8 yards a carry, whereas Cook averaged, 3? You know what I mean? 4? So I don't like that. I don't like that stat. So I don't like the fact that he got that one game where Cook was out, right? Because if Cook doesn't have that game where he's out, this isn't as scary, right? Because all these other weeks aren't scary. This is scary because the 1 week they're like, hey, let's have him be our running back 1 because Cook's not playing. 97 yards, 55 receiving yards. That's exactly kind of the stuff I'm hoping for Cook. But, running out of time. I am open to trades this year, Vinny. Let me know. I actually proposed some trades in our sleeper league, trying to get a wide receiver because in that league I'm also decimated at wide receiver. All my wide receivers are hurt because I had Ayuk and Evans in that league as well. I've got Evans in 3 leagues, Mitch. Of my 4 leagues, I've got Evans in 3 of them. So
I know you do. You probably have had
I'm
you have an Evans jersey on your wall. I'm sure you do.
I am super offended right now, Alex, that you've been sending wide receiver trades in the sleeper league and I haven't gotten a single one.
Well, I try to trade people who put stuff on the block, and the only thing you have on the block is your first round pick, and I don't think you want any. I don't want to trade you anything that you're willing to give me a first round pick for. But we'll talk about this more off the air. Let's wrap up the pod. Thanks everyone for listening.
Final thought.
Okay, final thought. Go ahead, Mitch.
I'm not trying to shower Chris with too much love, but he got me thinking about it in the last couple of days, so I want to bring it to the podcast. I don't know how to really exactly say it, but about 2 years ago when the Christian McCaffrey trade happened, it kind of opened the floodgates for trade deadline trades. Do you like, just food for thought to think about over this next week as more trades will happen and affect the fantasy landscape? Do you like the ability to, let's say you're having a bad year and you can kind of get lucky with the trades or plan for it, you can change your fortune halfway through the year? Do you like that? Or are you kind of in the old ways like myself where it's no, you should draft your team and that's the talent that you have and you shouldn't get lucky with trades during the year? Is it affecting fantasy in a positive way or is it affecting fantasy in a negative way? It'd be very interesting to hear people's thoughts on that. I hope I said that correctly and explained it properly.
I think in a keeper league, it's a lot more legitimate. In a one and done redraft league, I'm not as big of a fan of them because it's really hard to say that both players have a legit chance to make the playoffs. Because like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, you never want to take the knee. You never want to give up. You want to be like Todd Bowles and look, we're going to run our offense out there and go for it. So there's like Chris right now, he's 2-5, but he's not mathematically eliminated. So there's a world where Chris might want to be like, hey, let me see if I can, trade CMC and pick up someone, to play right now, to replace, let me trade CMC for a top tier quarterback or whatever. That's not the exact deal, but you know what I'm saying? And then CMC comes out and he changes the fortune of a team that he traded at a team that was already 4-3 or 5-2, right? So that's kind of the thing. It's I can't say Chris, and I'm not picking on Chris, I'm just looking at his team on the screen, that's why I'm using it. So it's it's not fair to tell Chris, you can't make that trade, but also it's it is kind of frustrating when those trades happen and then it ends up winning someone else the league and the guy who was not mathematically eliminated but pretty far out still ended up missing the playoffs. Right? It's very rare that the guy who makes that swing comes back from the hole and makes the playoffs, versus it usually helps out the guy who's already in good position and makes the trade. But I really do have to go, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. Any final thoughts, Vinny, on the same question?
It was meant to be like just thought for the week. I apologize. I didn't mean for you to respond. Not now.
For sure. Yeah. So let us know in the comments then. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I got nothing to add. Good chat. Good talks.
All right. Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, click that bell, all that jazz.
Let us know, chat.
Alex, buzz. It's me.
Yeah. What's up?
That's gonna be me hitting your inbox.
Hey.
Buzz, bitch. It's me again.
All right. Later, everybody. Peace out.